The little puppy had no idea he was being watched. His tiny paws trembled as he wandered alone in the vast wilderness. Then, from the shadows, glowing eyes emerged. 1, 2, 5 of them. A pack of hungry coyotes closed in, their sharp teeth glinting under the moonlight. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something unbelievable happened. Sometimes, the smallest creatures bring out the biggest heroes. This is the heart-stopping story of a helpless puppy surrounded by deadly predators, and the most unexpected hero who came to his rescue. It's a story of courage, loyalty, and the incredible bond between animals that will leave you speechless. Stay with me, because what happens next will restore your faith in miracles. It all started on a cold autumn evening. The wind howled through the towering trees, shaking their branches like ghostly whispers. The golden leaves, once vibrant with life, now carpeted the forest floor in a silent farewell to summer. A tiny golden retriever puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread, stumbled through the thick undergrowth, his soft paws barely making a sound against the damp earth. He had no name, no color, no trace of where he had come from. Maybe he had once belonged to a family, his small body curled up in the warmth of a soft bed, his days filled with playful barks and gentle hands scratching behind his ears. But now he was just a shadow in the wilderness, an innocent soul lost in a world that had no mercy for the weak. The little pup shivered as a gust of wind ruffled his golden fur. His ribs ached from hunger, his tiny stomach letting out a feeble growl. He let out a whimper, barely louder than a whisper, hoping, praying, that someone, anyone, would hear him. But the only response was the eerie rustling of leaves and the distant cry of an owl. His round, dark eyes darted around, searching for something familiar, anything that felt safe. The towering trees loomed over him like silent giants, their gnarled roots twisting through the earth like veins. He took a hesitant step forward, his little paws sinking into a patch of mud. His legs wobbled. He was tired, so tired. For a brief moment, he thought about giving up. Maybe if he curled into a ball and closed his eyes, he could pretend he was somewhere else, somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Maybe this was all just a bad dream, and soon he'd wake up to the sound of a kind voice calling his name. But there was no voice, no warm embrace, just the cold, unrelenting night. His ears perked up at the sound of movement nearby. A crack, a shuffle. His heart pounded in his tiny chest. Was it help? Was it a friend? No. Glowing eyes stared back at him from the darkness. Yellow, hungry, unblinking. The little puppy's breath hitched. He froze. His instincts told him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was not alone anymore, and that was far worse than being lost. The little puppy took another shaky step, his tiny paws pressing into the damp, leaf-covered ground. The air around him had changed. It was still, unnervingly quiet, too quiet. The rustling of the wind through the trees had faded. The distant calls of birds had vanished. Something was watching him, not far from where he stood. Hidden beneath the thick shadows of the undergrowth, a pack of coyotes lurked. Their bodies were low to the ground, their sharp claws digging into the dirt as they moved silently through the darkness. Their golden eyes flickered like dying embers, fixed on the small, trembling creature in front of them. He was alone, weak, defenseless. They could smell his fear, thick in the cold night air. It made their stomachs tighten with hunger. Coyotes weren't just scavengers. They were expert hunters, cunning, fast, ruthless. They knew how to wait, how to stalk, how to strike at just the right moment. The leader of the pack, a large male with tattered ears and scars across his muzzle, sniffed the ground where the puppy had just been. His sharp, bony ribs pressed against his skin. He hadn't eaten in days. The others watched him closely, waiting for a signal. They knew what was about to happen. A hunt. The leader's ears twitched as he took a step forward, his paws making no sound against the earth. The puppy had no idea. He continued walking, his head lowered, his little whimpers barely louder than the wind. The coyotes moved in, slow, their muscles tensed beneath their fur, ready to lunge the moment he was within reach. The puppy paused, his ears perked up. He could feel something, a strange, invisible weight pressing on his tiny chest. His heartbeat quickened. His instincts, though undeveloped, screamed at him, "Run!" But where? He turned his head ever so slightly, and that's when he saw them. Yellow eyes, 5 sets of them, staring, unmoving, waiting. His breath hitched, his legs stiffened. A moment of stillness. Then a low, menacing growl broke the silence. It came from the leader. His lips curled back, revealing long, jagged teeth. His growl was deep, guttural. vibrating through the air like a warning drum. The puppy felt his tiny body stiffen in terror. His mind screamed at him to run, to escape, to do anything but stand there frozen in fear. But his legs refused to move. He was too small, too weak. The coyotes inched closer, their bodies slinking through the darkness like living shadows. Their movements were almost graceful, like a well-rehearsed dance. The leader bared his teeth, taking another step forward. His mouth watered. This would be quick. The puppy took a staggering step back, his paw catching on a root. He stumbled, his body hitting the ground with a soft thud. His breath came in quick, shallow gasps. This was it. The leader crouched, muscles coiled like springs, ready to pounce. And then a single, piercing bark shattered the night. The little pup felt it before he heard it. A shift in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on him. His fur stood on end, and his body tensed. Something was coming. Then came the sounds. A twig snapping, a rustle in the leaves, the faintest growl, deep and rumbling, like a warning from the darkness itself. His tiny heart pounded in his chest. A primal instinct, buried deep within his fragile body, suddenly roared to life. Run! He didn't need to see them to know they were there. He could feel it, the eyes watching him, the silent figures moving through the trees like ghosts. His paws trembled against the cold earth as he took one hesitant step backward. Then another growl, louder this time, closer. It was like a switch flipped inside him. His instinct screamed, and without another thought, he turned and ran. But he was small, clumsy. His legs were weak from exhaustion, his tiny paws barely able to keep up with the desperate speed his mind demanded. He stumbled over roots, his breath coming in frantic gasps, his ears flattened against his head. Behind him, the sound of pursuit was terrifyingly clear. Leaves rustled violently. Twigs snapped under heavy paws. Panting breaths grew louder. They were gaining on him. His little body ached, his muscles burning with effort. But he couldn't stop. Stopping meant the end. His lungs screamed for air. His vision blurred with exhaustion. He could hear them, so close now. Feet pounding against the forest floor. Dry leaves crunching under their weight. Faster. They were getting faster. And then silence. For one brief moment, the world went still. Then, from the shadows, 5 figures emerged. They had him. He skidded to a stop, his tiny claws digging into the earth. His breath came in ragged gasps as his round, terrified eyes darted around. 5 coyotes. Their bodies moved in perfect sync, slinking closer, their yellow eyes locked onto him like a death sentence. The leader, a massive, scarred beast with cold, calculating eyes, stood directly in front of him. His lips curled back, exposing long, jagged teeth, stained from past hunts. They could have caught him already. Could have ended this chase in seconds, but they didn't. They liked the hunt. They enjoyed the fear. The little puppy whimpered, his ears flat against his head. His tiny tail curled tightly between his legs as he shrank down, his fragile body trembling. His mind was racing, searching desperately for a way out. There was none. Behind him, a coyote blocked his path. To his left and right 2 more. And ahead of him, the leader took another step forward, slow, deliberate, as if savoring the moment. The puppy tried to back away, his little paws scrambling against the dirt. No escape. This was it. The lead coyote's body tensed. His eyes gleamed with hunger. His back legs coiled like springs. He was ready to strike. The puppy closed his eyes, and then boom, a thunderous bark shattered the night. It wasn't just a bark. It was a war cry. A deep, powerful roar that echoed through the forest like an explosion. The kind that sent shockwaves through the ground, rattling the bones of everything in its path. The coyotes froze. The leader's ears flicked up. His body stiffened. His head snapped toward the source of the sound. Something was coming. A presence. A force. A savior. The little puppy's eyes shot open, his tiny body still trembling. He didn't know what had just happened, but something had changed. The night was no longer silent. It was about to become a battleground. The night had turned into a nightmare. The little puppy, too exhausted to run, had accepted his fate. His small body trembled. His wide, tear-filled eyes locked on the leader of the coyote pack. The massive coyote was only inches away now. His fangs gleamed in the dim moonlight, his breath hot and ragged. He was ready to strike. The hunt was over. The meal was his. The puppy shut his eyes. And then boom, a sound ripped through the night like a crack of thunder. A deep, earth-shaking bark. A presence so powerful, so commanding, that even the darkness seemed to recoil. It wasn't just a bark. It was a warning, a promise of battle. The coyotes froze. Their ears twitched. Their sharp eyes darted toward the tree line. Something was coming, And then, like a force of nature, he appeared. A massive figure burst into the clearing, his powerful legs kicking up dirt as he charged straight into the pack. His fur, a striking mix of black and tan, gleamed under the pale moonlight. His deep, rumbling growl sent shockwaves through the air. His muscles rippled beneath his thick coat as he came to a sudden, dominating stop between the coyotes and the helpless puppy. A German shepherd, but he wasn't just any dog. He was a guardian. The coyotes recoiled, their formation breaking. They hadn't planned for this. For a moment, silence. Then, the shepherd bared his teeth. It was a terrifying sight. Rows of sharp, gleaming fangs framed by powerful jaws strong enough to snap bone. His deep-set eyes burned with fury, locked onto the coyotes with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. The leader of the coyotes hesitated, his body tensed, his ears flattened. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had chosen an easy target, a meal that couldn't fight back. But now they were the ones being hunted. The German shepherd let out another bark, even deeper than before, like rolling thunder through the trees. His stance was firm, unshakable, radiating pure dominance. One of the smaller coyotes whimpered and took an uneasy step back. The others flicked their tails, exchanging wary glances. Their instinct screamed at them. This fight wasn't worth it. But the leader, he wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. His lips curled back in a snarl, his muscles coiling. He wasn't just hungry, he was desperate. And desperate predators didn't scare easily. The German shepherd saw it. He knew this coyote wasn't going to retreat without a fight. Fine. He was ready for one. With a burst of raw power, the shepherd lunged. It happened in a flash. The shepherd sprang forward, his massive paws slamming against the earth as he launched himself straight at the lead coyote. His growl turned into a fierce snarl, his teeth snapping just inches from the coyote's face. The leader yelped, caught off guard, and stumbled backward. Too slow. The shepherd struck again this time. He made contact. His powerful chest crashed into the coyote's side, sending the smaller predator tumbling onto the ground with a sharp, pained yelp. Dust flew into the air. Leaves scattered. The night exploded with chaos. The other coyotes panicked. Their leader, the strongest among them, had been knocked down. The shepherd didn't give them time to think. He spun toward the rest of the pack, his fur bristling, his deep, commanding bark ringing through the trees. It wasn't just a sound. It was a message. Leave, now, or suffer the consequences. The coyotes hesitated, their confidence shattered. Their once fearless leader lay on the ground, panting, his eyes wide with something they weren't used to feeling: fear. One by one, they started backing away. The shadows they once controlled now swallowed them as they retreated into the darkness. The leader was the last to move. He locked eyes with the shepherd, his body tense with defiance. But he knew he had lost. With a final flick of his tail, the defeated coyote turned and slunk into the shadows, his glowing eyes disappearing into the woods. Silence. For the first time that night, silence. The German shepherd stood firm, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. His ears twitched, listening, waiting, making sure they were truly gone. And then his sharp eyes softened. He turned. The little puppy was still frozen in place, his tiny body trembling, his round eyes overflowing with relief and awe. For a long moment neither of them moved. The puppy blinked up at the towering figure before him, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. 1 second, he had been moments from death. The next, he had been saved by him, his hero. The German shepherd let out a soft exhale, stepping closer. He lowered his massive head, his warm breath ruffling the puppy's fur. Then, gently, he nudged him. The puppy flinched at first, but then a different kind of warmth spread through his little body. A warmth he hadn't felt since before he got lost, since before the fear and loneliness took over. The German shepherd nudged him again, this time softer, reassuring, protective. And for the first time that night, the puppy let himself believe he wasn't alone anymore. The night was still. For the first time since the puppy had wandered into these unforgiving woods, the world around him was silent. No rustling in the bushes, no snapping of twigs, no glowing eyes lurking in the darkness. The predators were gone, but the little golden retriever puppy remained frozen. His tiny chest rose and fell rapidly, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The scent of danger still lingered in the air, and though his body ached with exhaustion, fear would not let him rest. Then a gentle nudge. The puppy flinched, letting out a tiny whimper, his frail body curling into itself. He squeezed his eyes shut, his instinct screaming that he was still in danger. but no attack came. Instead, the touch returned soft, warm, patient. He hesitated, then slowly peeked through one eye. The German Shepherd. He was still there. Unlike the coyotes, his eyes weren't filled with hunger or cruelty. There was no malice, no threat, only quiet reassurance, a silent promise that the danger was over. For a long moment, the little puppy just stared, his young mind struggling to understand. Why had this giant, powerful dog protected him? Why had he fought so fiercely? For a pup he didn't even know. His entire short life had been filled with loneliness, the cold nights, the empty belly, the fear of every sound, every shadow, every moment alone. And now, suddenly, someone had fought for him. Someone had saved him. The German Shepherd nudged him again, this time softer, more patient. The message was clear. You're safe now. Something deep inside the puppy shifted. The fear didn't leave completely, but it loosened its grip, just enough for something else to take its place. Something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Warmth. Slowly, his tiny tail gave the faintest wag. It wasn't much, just a flicker, barely noticeable in the moonlight. But to the German Shepherd, it meant everything. The big dog's ears perked slightly, his gaze softening. He had seen that look before, the hesitant, fragile spark of trust. But trust was delicate, and trust, once broken, was almost impossible to rebuild. He needed to be careful, so instead of moving, instead of making any sudden gestures, he simply lay down, lowering his strong body onto the forest floor. He settled beside the trembling pup, pressing himself just close enough for the puppy to feel his warmth, without forcing it. He let out a slow, deep exhale, not a growl, not a warning, a sigh of relief, because the battle was over, and they were both still standing. The puppy hesitated. His instincts still screamed at him to run, to hide, but something stopped him. The warmth. It seeped through his trembling fur, melting away the cold that had settled deep in his tiny bones. The scent of the German Shepherd wasn't like the wild, untamed scent of the coyotes. It was steady, familiar. It smelled like protection, like home. And suddenly, for the first time in days, maybe even weeks, the little puppy wasn't alone. The wind howled through the trees, rustling the leaves and sending a chill through the night. But this time, the cold didn't bite quite as harshly, because he had someone beside him, a guardian, a silent protector who had chosen him. The puppy inched closer, slowly, cautiously. His small body still quivered with leftover fear, but his tiny paws took those first brave steps, pushing him toward the warmth he had been missing for so long. And then, he curled up against the German Shepherd. The bigger dog didn't move, didn't react, didn't flinch. He simply allowed it, allowed the puppy to press into his side, his small golden fur blending into the shepherd's black and tan coat, allowed him to feel safe. And when the puppy let out a long, exhausted sigh and finally closed his eyes, the German Shepherd knew he had won more than just a battle tonight. He had won a friend. But what the shepherd didn't know, what neither of them could have known, was that this night was only the beginning, because fate had brought them together for a reason, and their journey had only just begun. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft strokes of gold and pink, pushing away the darkness that had nearly swallowed them whole. The little golden retriever puppy stirred first, his small body still pressed against the warm, protective frame of the German Shepherd. His tiny eyes blinked open, filled with curiosity, and for the first time in what felt like forever, not fear. The night had been long. The terror of the coyotes, the chilling loneliness, the uncertainty of whether he would survive. But he had, and he wasn't alone. The German Shepherd still lay beside him, his strong body a fortress of quiet strength. His ears twitched slightly at the distant sounds of morning, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. But he didn't move, because he knew, the moment he shifted, the moment he pulled away, the little pup would stir in panic. He could feel it, the fragile trust between them, the silent understanding they had formed in the darkest hours of the night. So he waited, not just to move, but to let the little one know, I'm still here. And when the puppy finally lifted his tiny head and looked up at him, eyes shining with something hesitant but hopeful, the shepherd gave the smallest, gentlest nudge, a silent reassurance, a promise. The pup yawned, stretching his tiny paws before pressing even closer, letting out a soft sigh of contentment. For the first time in days, maybe his whole life, he felt safe. A stranger approaches. Crunch! The sound of footsteps breaking twigs echoed through the trees. The German Shepherd's ears perked, his body stiffened. Something, or someone was coming. The puppy felt it too. He shrank into the shepherd's side, a small whimper escaping his lips. The safety he had just begun to trust felt fragile again, like a candle flickering in the wind. The German Shepherd did not move. He did not run. He did not growl. Instead, he stood, rising to his full height. He placed himself directly in front of the little retriever, his body forming an impenetrable barrier. His dark eyes locked onto the direction of the sound, his muscles tense, his posture commanding. Then, from the trees, a man appeared. The kind-hearted hiker. He was dressed in hiking gear, his backpack strapped tightly to his shoulders, a walking stick in hand. His boots were covered in dirt, a sign of a long journey through the forest. But what caught his attention wasn't the path ahead. It was the sight before him, a massive German Shepherd, standing guard over a tiny, golden retriever puppy. The hiker stopped in his tracks, eyes wide with disbelief. "What in the world?" he murmured. He had seen plenty of strays before, lost dogs, abandoned puppies, even animals who had been left behind when their owners could no longer care for them. But this was something different. The way the German Shepherd positioned himself, the way his sharp eyes studied the hiker, assessing him, deciding whether or not he was a threat. This wasn't just a stray protecting another stray. This was a guardian. And the puppy, he wasn't just following the shepherd, he was depending on him. The hiker took a slow step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay, buddy," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The German Shepherd didn't budge. The puppy, sensing the change in the air, let out a soft whimper and pressed closer to his protector. The shepherd's ears flicked at the sound, a split second of hesitation, of concern for the tiny life behind him, and the hiker saw it. He recognized it. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a story of survival, of trust, of something bigger than coincidence. Kneeling down, he extended his hand slowly. The shepherd stared at him, long, unblinking, studying. Then he stepped forward, not much, just enough to get a little closer. The hiker's breath hitched. He could see it now, the scars along the shepherd's legs, the dirt matted into his fur. He had been through a battle. He had fought for something, for someone, and somehow he had won. The hiker exhaled, his lips curving into a small, warm smile. "You did well," he whispered. "You saved him." The shepherd's ears flicked again, and then a sound, soft, hesitant, hopeful. The little puppy let out a small yip. The hiker's eyes flickered down, and his smile grew. That tiny sound, it wasn't just a noise. It was trust, a fragile, hopeful whisper of "I think you're safe." That was all the hiker needed to hear. Carefully, he reached out and scooped up the little pup, cradling him in his arms. The retriever didn't resist. He melted into the warmth, pressing his tiny nose into the man's jacket. And the German Shepherd, he watched, not with fear, not with distrust, but with understanding, because for the first time since he had chased off those coyotes, since he had shielded that tiny pup from danger, he wasn't alone in protecting him. The hiker gently ran a hand over the shepherd's head, his touch filled with gratitude. "Let's get you both home." And for the first time in what felt like forever, the German Shepherd allowed himself to hope. A home for two. The journey from the woods to the nearest shelter was long. The hiker carried the little retriever in his arms, while the shepherd never left his side. Even when they reached safety, even when food and water were placed in front of them, the shepherd never strayed far. At first, the shelter workers assumed they would be like any other rescues, just two dogs needing separate homes. But the moment they tried to separate them, the German Shepherd refused. His body tensed, his eyes darkened, and the little retriever, he cried, not just a whimper, not just a small protest, a heart-wrenching, broken sound that silenced the entire room. Because they had fought to stay together, they had survived because of each other, and now they were losing each other. No, the shelter workers didn't hesitate. They put them back together, and instantly, the little retriever stopped crying. Instantly, the German Shepherd relaxed, and when a family walked in looking to adopt, they took one look at them, and they knew. "We can't take just one," the mother whispered, her heart already full. And just like that, they found their forever home, together, as they were always meant to be. Some say animals don't feel emotions the way we do, but this story proves otherwise. In a world where survival often comes first, kindness still finds a way. The German Shepherd didn't have to step in. He could have walked away, but he chose to protect a helpless life. Maybe that's what true bravery looks like. Not just strength, but the courage to stand up for someone who can't fight for themselves. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more incredible animal stories. You won't want to miss the next one.